Today on Notsam Wrestling, we now know what the favor that Paul Heyman owes CM Punk is, but how will it impact the triple threat match at WrestleMania? Jey Uso and Gunther gets exactly what the rivalry needed. Tiffany Stratton and Charlotte Flair may have gotten something else. I don't know. Kevin Owens apparently out of WrestleMania and so much more. This is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling, and it's really interesting because the whole world has changed in terms of the build to WrestleMania, at least in my opinion, in the last 7 days. I mean, if you look at everything, we've had 2 emergency podcasts. We, of course, did the Raw recap podcast with Megan Morant that came out on Tuesday, or I guess it came out technically Monday night, but, Tuesday morning show. But Cody and John Cena finally gets to a place where you go, okay, I get this rivalry. I think we're getting to where we need to be. Jey Uso and Gunther finally gets to a place where you're like, okay, I'm back to understanding this rivalry. I think we're at a place where we need to be. We've got more matches being announced for WrestleMania. You've got a triple threat match where the sort of overarching look of what this is really about is finally made clear to us during a season in which there were doubters that were saying, I don't know, it doesn't really feel like a WrestleMania build to me. This WrestleMania build has been a little bit lackluster. And sure, the build to the first weekend of April has not been as exciting as maybe in the past, but that's because WrestleMania isn't in the first weekend in April. If we had gotten ready for the first weekend of April, as if we were ready for WrestleMania, we'd have a long 3 weeks to get through before we're actually getting to WrestleMania. We have 3 extra weeks of WrestleMania season. And so far with one of those 3 extra weeks being used, they're being used. We'll see how it goes for the next 2. Don't forget, I mentioned Raw Recap to make sure that you're listening or watching to that podcast every Tuesday morning. You can subscribe to the podcast feed, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. You can also watch on the WWE's YouTube channel. And speaking of WrestleMania week, we'll be there at the Comedy Cellar in Las Vegas, a live Not Sam Wrestling podcast, already talking about guest bookings. It's going to be a spectacular show. Make sure you're there. Tickets are available at notsam.com. It'll be the Thursday before WrestleMania, 5 p.m. local time, April 17th. But I think what feels the most appropriate as a way to start this show is to talk about, if you're a regular listener, if you follow this voice, wherever this voice goes, let's pick up the conversation where we last left it. Friday Night SmackDown this week required an emergency podcast. We got an emergency podcast coming off of Raw and coming off of SmackDown. And by the way, both Raw and SmackDown, I had people saying we need a second emergency podcast on both. I could have justified, because on Monday, I did the emergency podcast for Cody Rhodes and John Cena, but I could have easily justified doing an emergency podcast as well for Jey Uso and Gunther. And on Friday, I did the emergency podcast for the Paul Heyman favor, but I could have easily justified also doing one for Charlotte and Tiffany Stratton, and a third one for the Kevin Owens thing. But here we are to discuss all of it. So it's time for the analysis. Let's put the feelings away, and let's talk about what we saw Friday on SmackDown. Of course, the show starts with CM Punk in Chicago. Chicago being the first American television crowd on this build to WrestleMania since that 3-week European tour. And I was proud that Chicago did pick up the soccer hooligan chants. There was the Roman Reigns. It made me laugh because, in Chicago, most of the people chanting, I'm going to assume, had never chanted in that specific rhythm before. But now it's gone from being a soccer chant to being a wrestling chant. And here we are. And I hope we take it. I hope we take it. And as wrestling fans, just make it our own. Just sing for our favorite wrestlers. I think that's a great idea. So the show starts, of course, CM Punk in the Allstate Arena, the old Rosemont Horizon coming out. And everybody's happy to see CM Punk, talks to the crowd a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, here comes Paul Heyman, and Paul Heyman's talking to CM Punk. And to me, the most interesting part of the whole first segment was when Paul Heyman said, Punk, could you tell me what the favor is? Because I've got a very angry tribal chief, and we know how these Samoans get when they're angry. I don't know if you've ever met Sika, God rest his soul, the wild Samoan. And I like that, like, because Roman Reigns is portrayed and carries himself so much differently than a lot of the people in his family did, and a lot of the way they were portrayed, right? When you talk about the wild Samoans or the head shrinkers or Yokozuna or whatever it is, Roman is a different breed, but Paul Heyman is sitting there going like, whatever that thing was that you feared about them, that's what the bloodline is. That's what's in this man's blood. But I think the most thing was this is the first time that I got the impression at all that Paul Heyman didn't know what the favor was. I had thought there was a specific favor that Paul Heyman had promised to CM Punk. And that's why part of this was, I'm surprised that Paul Heyman has gotten away without telling Roman Reigns what the favor is. I mean, we never got an answer from Paul Heyman as to why his phone was disconnected that one time Roman tried to call him. But I thought it was along the same lines, that maybe he and Roman are still kind of putting that relationship back together, and Roman doesn't ask questions that he feels like he might not want the answers to, if that makes sense. But as it turns out, Roman could have asked Paul Heyman what the favor was until he was blue in the face. Paul Heyman had no idea. Paul Heyman did this is not good for negotiation. Paul Heyman really was in a desperate spot, because to just say, I owe you a favor, and it is something that is being hung over your head. It is something that is being mentioned fairly often on television. It is something that CM Punk is bringing up as this is going to be a big deal. And you don't know. You just said, yeah, whatever it is, I'll do it. I mean, look, you won the War Games match. I certainly hope it was worth it. Paul says Roman's not here. Punk says, okay, well, I'll tell you what the favor is when Roman gets here. So right there, I mean, the fact that like on SmackDown, there was a chyron that said, tonight we find out what the favor is. For as much as this has been built up since Thanksgiving of last year, it's kind of fun. Like when I was looking at like the results, like the little chyrons that they put up, the little graphics that they put up on the screen, here's what happened, here's what's still to come on the show. And it actually said, CM Punk reveals what the favor is. It's like, okay, tonight's the night. And so I'm watching SmackDown, and Seth Rollins comes in. Paul Heyman thinks it's his tribal chief, Roman Reigns, but it's Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins lets us know that he will also be coming to the ring just to observe, just to bear witness to whatever this favor is going to be. He's ready to be entertained. So Roman gets to the building, goes straight from his car into the arena, into the ring. No pyro, no stopping, no aura. Straight, I mean, look, Roman carries himself with a certain aura regardless, but none of the prototypical aura stuff. Now, the first thing that I noticed, by the way, is that Roman comes in, and I notice his shirt, because I go, oh, Tribal Chief's got a new t-shirt. I think I got to buy it. I mean, I've said that many, many times. But I believe the first time I saw the YTC shirt was when I was co-hosting on Busted Open, and Dave LaGreca and I interviewed Roman Reigns on the day of the Royal Rumble. And he was wearing a shirt that said YTC. And I guess that was because at the time, the purpose of OTC was to say, in comparison to Solo Sikoa, who carries himself as the tribal chief, I am the original, whatever you want to say, tribal chief. And then once he beat Solo Sikoa, he started wearing that shirt that said YTC on it. Except then on SmackDown, he had a shirt that went back to OTC. For me right away, and I said this on the Emergency podcast late on Friday night, immediately I think to myself, YTC is a far more babyface appealing thing than OTC is. To go back to OTC is to take the honor for yourself. To embrace being your tribal chief is to say, I'm doing it for you. To be the OTC is to be the only tribal chief. It is all mine. That's when Roman, who we know is the tribal chief, we saw him beat Solo Sikoa, starts to, as I've been pointing out over the last week or so, drift back into that sort of narcissistic space that Roman Reigns was in when he was the WWE champion. And I think that subtle thing, that putting OTC back on the t-shirt, you listen to the conversations that I've had with Paul Heyman or with Roman Reigns, they'll tell you the same thing I've been telling you. Everything counts. Everything is done with intention. That I don't think we're in a space anymore where Roman is embracing the fans as he once did. In fact, he's wearing the OTC shirt and he goes to the ring and he's doing the same thing he did when he was the world champion, pretending like he's being nice, but calling the fans in Chicago stupid, right? I don't blame you. You're just stupid. Carrying himself is better than. And we love Roman Reigns so much that it's either he can get away with it or we don't notice that he's doing it because we're just enjoying our tribal chief so much. But he's not our tribal chief. He's the only tribal chief. He's the original tribal chief. Technically, he's our tribal chief, but that's not why he wears the shirt. So Roman is in there, and Punk announces the favor. He says the favor is that Paul Heyman is going to accompany him to the ring at WrestleMania. And the way he sets this up, look, you know me. This was on my bingo card for months. I've been telling you forever. I mean, if you just listen to Notsam Wrestling and follow the path that I lay out for you, you don't really need to go off that path. I'm telling you what's going to happen. I told you that this match was going to be the main event of WrestleMania and it was going to be in the contract for CM Punk. I told you that the favor was going to be that Paul Heyman was going to be in CM Punk's corner at WrestleMania. I told you all this stuff. And you might say, well, there were more than just you said it. Other people said it too. Well, I don't know. I don't listen to other people. I listen to me. And I know that I said it. But what makes the, and you might go, what do you want everything to be predictable? It's not about being predictable. It's about how things get presented, not what gets presented. And the way CM Punk set it up, he set it up in a way where you can understand why Paul Heyman would have to say yes. He set it up in a way where he was talking about after December to Dismember, the one standalone ECW pay-per-view, when Paul Heyman either got fired or quit, depending on what story you're listening to. He talked about Heyman leaving and the conversations that they had together. And that Heyman said, no, you'll be fine. Because CM Punk said, I'm done without you. And Heyman said, you'll be fine. Just make sure that when you're main eventing WrestleMania, you make them have to deal with us. And he talked about Paul Heyman being on Monday Night Raw and saying that CM Punk was his best friend and that he was going to be by CM Punk's side when CM Punk main evented WrestleMania. And it was awesome that he said that because this is a clip that's been going around on Twitter for the last week or so. People dug it up and they found it, and it was over a decade ago. I watched it. It was amazing to see. Over a decade ago, Paul Heyman is explaining to CM Punk that CM Punk is his best friend and that it may not be soon, but when CM Punk does main event WrestleMania, Paul Heyman will be there walking him to the ring. He said it over a decade ago. And CM Punk set up all that real life history so that when he threw it to Roman Reigns and Roman started laughing and saying, even if I let him do it, he wouldn't. Wise man, let him down easy. He loves me, Roman said. He loves me. And Paul Heyman said, I can't. He said, wise man, tell him no. And the wise man said, I can't do that. And Roman got furious and he grabbed him by the lapels and the physicality unleashed and Seth Rollins is laughing and CM Punk and Roman Reigns are hitting at each other and Roman Reigns eats a go to sleep while Paul Heyman is looking on in sheer terror. Now, after we talked about it on the emergency podcast, I went into the comments because for a couple of reasons, but mainly because, number one, I like to just hear what your theories are because maybe you'll think of something that I didn't think of. I go, that's interesting. Yeah, I can see that happening. But also, part of this podcast is I like to not just live inside my own brain, but I like to at least attempt. I'm not always going to hit all home runs, but I like to attempt to be aware, at least aware. Whether I agree or disagree is a different deal. I like to be aware of what the conversation is around this stuff that we're talking about. And when I say, talk to me in the comments about what just happened, that's part of it, right? There's two things. There's two things I don't have time for in the comments right now. One of them I really don't have time for. It's completely unrelated to this, but while we're talking about comments, People in the comments going, you don't need to do an emergency podcast about everything. Oh, look at this guy. He does an emergency podcast about everything. Yeah, I do an emergency podcast about everything. That's the whole, I mean, if you don't like that I do an emergency podcast about everything, that's like leaving a comment on one of the Barstool Pizza reviews and saying, hey, this is Dave Portnoy. He takes more than one bite. Like, okay, yeah, yes. Right. That's the whole thing. But okay, that's me being me. There are still people down there that were saying there's no stakes in this match. This is a meaningless match. I mean, listen. If you can't get pulled in by human drama of characters that we have been following for years and deep-seated human drama between the CM Punk, Roman Reigns, and Seth Rollins characters, this is the culmination of well over a decade of history amongst all four Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, CM Punk, and Paul Heyman participants. There is so much going on in this match. This match is like going to like a play just to see it all this conflict get acted out in front of our faces. I mean, if you just like matches where it's, you know, one guy versus another guy for a belt, I get it. But if you like rooted stories, there's so much rooted story in this match. As a matter of fact, it's not even like this thing could have been thrown together. At least I don't think. I mean, who knows, right? Your guess is as good as mine. But when you think about it, the favor was introduced as a story beat Thanksgiving of last year. And it has been played to perfection up until right now. It is something that gets mentioned when CM Punk comes out, that gets mentioned when Roman Reigns comes out. Was this match on the table in November? Was this match on the table before then? Have we been low-key been telling the story of this match since then? I mean, we remember the interactions between CM Punk and Roman Reigns at War Games. That came to a head. We took care of the Solo Sikoa thing. We put a bow on that on Netflix. By the time we get to the Royal Rumble, that comes to a head. You know, we all assumed it was going to be Solo and Roman at WrestleMania back then. But maybe this has been the plan all along, you know? I think you saw Roman playing all the emotions, right? Looking forward and then looking over at Paul and realizing that Paul is distraught. Paul Heyman doesn't know what to do with himself. And you can see Roman is getting frustrated and worried and angry all at the same time about what the wise man is doing over here. Meanwhile, Seth Rollins is laughing at Roman the whole time. Now, what I would like to see from Seth Rollins, and maybe we'll see it this week at some point, is more of a justification. Because I don't want Seth Rollins to just be reacting to what's going on between Roman and Punk. Because Seth Rollins has skin in the game himself with both CM Punk and Roman Reigns. I would like to see more of Seth Rollins. Why is Seth Rollins enjoying what's happening with Roman Reigns so much? I mean, we know because we've been following this, but tell me about that. Talk to me more about the fact that Seth Rollins has to come to terms with the fact that he failed his stated mission. His stated mission was to keep CM Punk out of the main event of WrestleMania, and he brought CM Punk to the main event of WrestleMania. He touched on it on SmackDown, but like, you were in a real funk a week ago. So talk to me about everything you did to get out of that. I start immediately, as I'm thinking about the dynamic between all these players, and now the fact, and you know, Paul Heyman is like, when Roman Reigns gets knocked out by the GTS, Paul Heyman is in shambles. You know, this is the first time that we've seen a manager, an advocate, a wise man, a special counsel, whatever you want to call it, in a position like this, where he is technically, it would appear, going to be in the corner of CM Punk voluntarily. That's the beauty of this. A lot of people were like, oh, they're going to make it a title match, or they're going to make the winner go over here. They're going to, a lot of people thought the favor was going to be something that Paul Heyman didn't have the power to do, which I never understood how that could be. I love that the favor is, at its core, voluntary. Paul Heyman doesn't see it as voluntary because he sees CM Punk as his best friend, maybe the only person, save for Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, that Paul Heyman has real, true loyalty to. And even Brock Lesnar you might be able to take off because Paul Heyman picked Roman Reigns over Brock. But in this instance, Paul Heyman, while he is doing something voluntarily, and while Paul Heyman has been as sneaky as any wrestling corner man has ever been, he, as much as he loves his tribal chief, he can't say no to CM Punk. They've been through too much. They've done too much. They're best friends in a real way. And yeah, it's voluntary, but really to Paul Heyman, he's saying it's not voluntary. So how does this match go, right? As we're looking at it right now, and maybe it's just because I'm such a Roman Reigns fan, and that's fair, I have a hard time seeing CM Punk win the match. If Paul Heyman is in CM Punk's corner, I have a hard time, because then CM Punk just gets everything. If CM Punk walks to the ring with Paul Heyman, he's got one clean victory over Seth Rollins. Technically, Seth Rollins beat him in the cage match, but that was because of Roman Reigns. So there's been one clean finish in a CM Punk-Seth Rollins match, and CM Punk got it on the Netflix Raw. So you mean to tell me that not only does CM Punk get the clean victory over Seth Rollins, get Roman Reigns as wise man, he get the main event of WrestleMania, which was his stated goal, he also gets to win. And he's still a babyface? He just gets everything? Even Cody Rhodes had to lose 1 year to win the next. He couldn't have everything. And this would be giving CM Punk everything. Hard for me to see that. So, I mean, unless the idea is, CM Punk is going to win, Roman Reigns is going to disappear for 3 months, Seth Rollins is going to go, do something else somewhere else, whether, go to another show or something, or completely move on to another storyline. And then you've just got Paul Heyman and CM Punk back together as kind of a nostalgia run for whatever's next for CM Punk. I don't know. But for me, the way I would do it, the way I would like to see it, the way I think I would say, like right now, if you sat me down and said, how would you do this? I would suggest Roman Reigns comes out victorious. I just think so much has been invested into this Roman Reigns character that he's just not there to lose big matches. He's lost. I mean, and as ironic as it sounds, because he's barely lost anything, right? He lost at WrestleMania, solo pinned him once, and he lost the Royal Rumble. That's enough losing for me. I'm done with Roman Reigns losing. I want Roman Reigns to win this match, but really the reason that I want him to win the triple threat is because you know how I am. If you listen to this podcast at all, you know exactly how I am. Somebody wrote an email last week. They said, of these 3 matches, which is the one that you want to see the most? I said, it depends on what the story is. For me, it's what is the story after the match? Explain to me what the story is moving forward. Because any of these 3 guys, if you've got a great story for them moving forward, then you can sell me on it. For me, I think it goes back to the t-shirt that Roman Reigns was wearing. And there were some people that have said Roman Reigns was not a babyface when he came back at SummerSlam, which is insane. Okay? Roman Reigns has been a babyface for all intents and purposes from August of 2024 until January, like end of February of 2025, March of 2025. Maybe I would say, the first inclination that Roman, you could argue if you're looking at heel and babyface, which heel and babyface are very limiting terms for kind of three-dimensional characters that exist at the top of the card in WWE these days. I mean, you have a little bit more clear-cut. Like, Cody Rhodes is a clear-cut babyface. And honestly, the fact that Cody Rhodes is a clear-cut babyface and has been able to hold on to the WWE title as long as he's had it, and has been able to, more importantly, hold on to the fans cheering him as long as he's been able to do that, I mean, it puts him on a level of skill, the likes of which, I mean, I've gone over this before, we haven't seen in a very long time. But for a lot of people, the idea of heel, babyface, it's a little, that's a little bit yesterday. However, for all intents and purposes, for the purpose of this conversation, Roman Reigns is a babyface when he comes back at SummerSlam. He's going after Solo Sikoa. Solo Sikoa's a heel. It makes Roman a babyface. Everybody's cheering for him. If you're coming back and everybody's cheering for you and you're beating up a bad guy, I don't see how you're not a good guy, right? What does he do at Bad Blood? First of all, what does he do? He starts he gets back together with Jimmy, right? He and Jimmy are back together again. And he says, did you call this play? And then he hugs him. He allows Jimmy Uso to call a play and embraces him for a play that Jimmy called. Babyface. He's corrected his old behaviors. He goes to Bad Blood in October. Who does he team with? Cody Rhodes. Is he happy about it? No. Does he want eventually to take the title away from Cody Rhodes? Yes. Is Cody Rhodes standing in his way in life? Yes. But it's Roman and Cody versus two bad guys. He's a good guy. War Games. New bloodline, original bloodline with CM Punk versus new bloodline. New bloodline are bad guys. Roman even brings Jey Uso back into the family. Sami Zayn. Roman's a good guy. We move into January, Netflix Raw. Roman beats Solo Sikoa, takes him out of power, becomes the tribal chief again. Roman Reigns is a good guy. But now he's the tribal chief again. And he walks into the Royal Rumble as the tribal chief. Okay, nothing much has changed. But then he loses in the Royal Rumble. CM Punk eliminates him. Seth Rollins tries to stomp him. Okay. That wasn't what he wanted. He shows up on Raw. He pulls Seth Rollins out of that cage. Beats CM Punk and Seth Rollins into smithereens. For revenge? Yeah, but also because he wants to beat up CM Punk in front of Paul Heyman. That's not as good guy of a move. Shows up to SmackDown wearing an OTC t-shirt. For me, I think Roman Reigns wins at WrestleMania. And the story from WrestleMania 40 to 41 is the story of Roman Reigns licking his wounds, coming back from the unfathomable to him WrestleMania 40 championship loss to Cody Rhodes. That's 40 to 41. But at 41, he's reset himself as the tribal chief. He's put his family back into place. He wins the main event of WrestleMania. Now we move forward. After WrestleMania 41, if Roman Reigns wins that match without Paul Heyman, well, now Roman Reigns not only can set his sights on becoming the WWE champion again, but can be even more the narcissistic, insane leader than he was before, because now, for the first time since he was the big dog, he's won a WrestleMania main event with no help whatsoever. He's won a WrestleMania main event. If Roman Reigns can win a WrestleMania main event against CM Punk and Seth Rollins without the bloodline and without Paul Heyman in his corner and with Paul Heyman in an opponent's corner, well, now, who's going to stop the tribal chief? Now, who's going to stop him from running things? And now, Paul Heyman is in this position where he's got to chase that meal ticket like he's never chased it before. Paul Heyman is in this position where he has to literally be of service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yes to everything, no to nothing, only there to serve the tribal chief, and Roman can make Paul Heyman prove his loyalty at every turn. Roman has successfully gone back to being a villain. Because Paul Heyman's going to have to prove his loyalty. If Jimmy Uso wants to get back on the gravy train, if Jey Uso wants to get back on the gravy train, whoever wants to, they're going to have to come knocking to the tribal chief, who is back and maybe more unstoppable than ever before. That's the Roman Reigns that I want to see coming out of WrestleMania 41, where when he comes in, and he'll still be there sporadically, but when he comes in, it's, oh no, Roman's here, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it, and that has been proven. Why do we need Roman Reigns as a heel? It's only a matter of time before Jacob Fatu is a babyface, right? But, that's my thing, okay? There's another theory floating around. I saw it in the YouTube comments. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen people mentioning me. The other theory that's floating around is Seth Rollins. Now, I could argue that Seth Rollins would benefit from winning this match more so than anybody else in this match. Seth Rollins brought up two very, very interesting events during Friday Night SmackDown segment. One was costing Roman Reigns the championship at WrestleMania 40, the first time that's been addressed really since WrestleMania 40. Two, the heist of the century, which, if you think about it, was also Roman Reigns' match. And that was WrestleMania 31. 10 years later, Seth Rollins is back in a triple threat match with Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman's at ringside. The last time that was the case at a WrestleMania main event, it was the heist of the century, when Seth Rollins cashed in and turned the main event into a triple threat that he then was able to win. That this moment that was going to be Roman's coming of age. Roman wins the Royal Rumble, and boos in Philadelphia be damned. Roman was going to WrestleMania to beat Brock Lesnar and become the WWE champion, but no. Seth Rollins didn't allow it to be so, and here comes Seth, heist of the century, he wins. 9 years after that, Roman Reigns is ready to beat Cody Rhodes and retain his WWE championship, but Seth Rollins gets involved again. And so now, and causes enough of a distraction to give Cody the moment that he needs to gain his bearings. Few crossroads later, Roman Reigns is no longer the WWE champion. That's 2 WrestleManias that the WWE championship slipped away from Roman being able to hold it up at the end of the night because of Seth Rollins. Now, there's no WWE championship here, but it is a main event of WrestleMania. I know. No, only night 2 is the main event. Enough. It's going on last. On Saturday. There's a theory going around that Paul Heyman could betray CM Punk and, instead of going back to Roman Reigns, sticks himself with Seth Rollins. Now, I love the idea of the continuity between WrestleMania 31, 40, and 41. Seth Rollins screws Roman Reigns. I love the idea of maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Roman Reigns sticks to being more of a babyface. Seth Rollins goes full heel. And now we move forward with a Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns full-on program. It would also make CM Punk versus a truly heel Seth Rollins very, very interesting. I think Seth Rollins' best work he's ever done in terms of character work was as a villain. I think Seth Rollins is a great, great, great heel. He's one of those heels that's so good he can only be a heel for a certain amount of time before he has to turn babyface. But then all you really want him to do is to turn heel again because he's so damn good at it. So there is this idea that Paul Heyman could turn on CM Punk, in the process also turning on Roman Reigns, and side with Seth Rollins. Now, the only reason that I don't like this, because, like I said, all the results are fascinating of it. The only reason I don't like it is because there's no, right now, I don't see the coherent logic. I can see how Seth screwing over Roman Reigns at 3rd WrestleMania, there is a logic to it. I could see Seth Rollins getting that victory over CM Punk. This technically would be a rubber match. I could see that logic to it. You know, I could see all of this. But what's the connection with Paul Heyman and Seth Rollins? That's what I'm not seeing. That's the only part of this puzzle that I'm not seeing, that there is so much foundation in CM Punk and Paul Heyman and so much foundation in Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman. What is the foundation with Paul Heyman and Seth Rollins? Seth Rollins said he was a Dusty guy, not a Heyman guy. So what is that foundation? I mean, unless the only thing is, like, Paul Heyman does have this very over-the-top dislike, disgust, disdain when Seth Rollins comes to the ring, speaks to him, does anything. Paul Heyman hates it when Rollins shows up. Could it be an example of the lady doth protest too much? Methinks so. Maybe that is an appropriate, intentional misdirection, because that's where the story is actually going. But I still need to understand what the connection between Heyman and Seth Rollins would be. It would be a fascinating swerve for sure. And look, just based on the players alone, based on Rollins and Heyman and Punk and Roman, I'm sure you could get us there. But right now, if you really want me to go for that, hit me with the execution. Hit me with why. Why would Heyman do that? I'm not saying he wouldn't. And I'm not saying that every other result of it wouldn't be amazing. Except for that little logic hole. You know, when Paul Heyman turned on Brock Lesnar and sided with the Big Show in like 2003 or whenever that was, I hated that. I thought it was dumb. Because it's like, why would Paul Heyman all of a sudden just manage the Big Show? I didn't understand it. So give me something that stops that from being the case, and I'm all on board with it, because everything else about it is wildly fascinating. Speaking of wildly fascinating, there's a rivalry that needed a moment more than maybe any other rivalry in the build to WrestleMania, and that rivalry got it. Jey Uso and Gunther. So last week, I talked about a world where Jey Uso and Gunther could main event one of the two nights of WrestleMania. And there were people like on whatever, anti-Jey Uso Twitter that were sending out the video and sharing the clip. What is this idiot saying? And I wasn't advocating for that to be the case. I was presenting a what-if scenario and creating the what-if scenario. We use our brains on Notsam Wrestling. We use our brains on this podcast. We explore possibilities. We don't shut things down, okay? That's not what this show is, okay? So no, I mean, you know, but I think more importantly, what I said last week was that the Jey Uso Gunther rivalry had become far more a rivalry of Jey Uso, A, versus himself, and B, versus the audience that didn't believe in him. Now, that audience, of course, as we've pointed out, is generally not heard in arenas, but you don't have to travel very far on the internet to hear that audience. And to live in a world where we go, oh, that's just Twitter being Twitter, that's not true. If the internet is talking, people are talking. There's no such thing as an internet wrestling fan anymore. What wrestling fan doesn't have the internet? It's like when I listen to podcasts and they bring up like internet wrestling fans, I go, how did anybody get your podcast? It's a wrestling podcast. Where is your podcast available other than the internet? Because by definition, if it's a podcast, they'd have to have the internet, and they'd have to be using the internet to get wrestling content. That's how they got your podcast. So unless you're talking about your listeners right now, so I don't believe in the separation. I do believe that there's something else. You're in the arena. You kind of get swept up in the moment, and people do have a love for Jey Uso, and people will speak more freely on the internet because, you're getting into full sentences. You're not just yaying or booing. And also there's, the beautiful thing that is anonymity. And so you could just kind of point out, whatever you feel about whatever. But I think that there was an inherent problem in the idea that this story had become Jey Uso versus the audience or versus himself. And that inherent problem was, what about the World Heavyweight Champion? Yes, that's a fascinating story for a performer, but that is a side story. That's not a wrestling story. We need a wrestling story. It is a wrestling match. And boy, did we get it. We got a pure, utter, true wrestling story. Gunther came in on Monday Night Raw and decided to remind the world that this is not Jey's story. This is not Jey Uso needing to find that thing within. This is Jey Uso versus Gunther. And Gunther destroys people. And the WWE took the time to remind us that Jey's self-doubt is the least of his concerns. He's got to fight the ring general. He's got to fight Gunther. And so we have Jimmy Uso, and I love that Jimmy Uso had all the confidence in the world, because that's what they're saying. Jey, you just need to have that confidence. And Jimmy said, Gunther's just a man. He's just a human being, and he's beatable, and I'm going to beat him tonight, and then you're going to beat him at WrestleMania. And then Jimmy Uso went out there, and he got beaten into smithereens. He got beaten bloody, because that's Gunther. That's not a person. And Gunther beat him so bad, he's toying with him. He's going for the cover, and he's lifting up Jimmy's shoulders. And he's going for another cover, and he's lifting up Jimmy's shoulders. And then he finally beats him, but he's not done with him. He attacks him, and Jey comes out to make the save. And then when Jey is helping Jimmy backstage, because Jimmy Uso has already taken a beating bad enough. Confidence be damned. He's already taken a beating bad enough that he needs to be helped backstage. As that help has come, Gunther arrives once more. And he takes everybody down, and he's got zip ties this time. And he zip ties Jey Uso to the ring ropes. In a world where handcuffs have become the norm in professional wrestling, can we just say how much better zip ties are than handcuffs? All of a sudden, zip ties are real life. Handcuffs are a movie prop. Zip ties are real life. When you watch Cops, they zip tie behind the back. Everybody is familiar with zip ties. Most of us, God willing, haven't felt the cold steel wrapped around our wrist before. But what we know of handcuffs is, sure, police use handcuffs, but every magician uses handcuffs as well. You assume most handcuffs are trick handcuffs. You go, oh, how did they get this guy handcuffed to the rope? Well, there's just a button. You just push it when you're done with the segment. Zip ties are zip ties. We've all felt zip ties. We've all used zip ties on something or other. Everybody at a point has tried to unlock a zip tie, and it's never been successful for anyone. So to see Jimmy zip tied to the rope, you go, he really can't escape. And that's when Gunther takes this person who has all the confidence that Jey Uso needs to have and still beats him within an inch of his life, beats Jimmy Uso so bloody that even Gunther is covered in blood, but it's not Gunther blood, it's Uso blood. And Jey is watching his brother beaten bloody. He's watching the blood of his own family smeared across the chest and arms and legs of Gunther. Gunther, like an absolute maniacal savage, licking his fingers like a maniac. And then I just love, and I talked about this on the Raw Recap podcast as well, just for the pure art, the pure metaphor of it all, Gunther dangling the World Heavyweight title for Jey Uso to try to grab, and Jey Uso doing everything he could to grab the title, but he couldn't because he was zip-tied to the ropes. He couldn't help his brother, and he couldn't get the championship. So now, all of a sudden, we're not just looking at somebody who is trying to help his brother but can't get it. In that moment, we're witnessing a metaphor for Jey Uso being in a position where no matter how bad he wants it, no matter how much this is his time or this is his moment, it's Gunther. Gunther is the zip tie of wrestling. You can't break him. He's not going to let you have it. And just the visuals it created. One of the times when I can't imagine anybody denying that blood brings this story from an 8 to a 10. I mean, you could have never watched wrestling before in your life. And you watch that segment, I know who the good guy is, I know who the bad guy is, and I will buy a ticket to see the good guy beat the bad guy. And that's what wrestling is. It is so difficult in the modern age to stick to a wrestling story. And I think we had drifted away from a pure wrestling story. But we are back. And it is more so than ever that you watch that segment, and that is the type of segment that makes you buy a ticket, that makes you turn on Peacock, that makes you do whatever you got to do to watch this show, because you want to see the good guy beat the bad guy, and you want to find out how on earth the good guy is going to beat that bad guy. This is what Jey Uso versus Gunther needed. It's not a reflection of what people are saying on Twitter. We've got so much of that. And by the way, that is the foundation for who Jey Uso is now. It's great to acknowledge the reality of what's going on. But I don't think that just acknowledging the reality of what's going on is enough to sell a WrestleMania match. It has to be so big to sell a WrestleMania match. I think you need to do more, and that's what this is. To take that as a foundation, but then tell a wrestling story in the ring that convinces people to want to watch this match. And I think that that's what Jey Uso and Gunther and Jimmy and everything that happened in that segment, I think that's exactly what they did. And I thought it was, great. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Now, you've got wrestling stories, and then sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes you realize you're just along for the ride, and no matter what your preconception of something might be, you're interested. You just have an interest level. Now look, Tiffany Stratton and Charlotte Flair come to the ring on SmackDown. Wade Barrett is there to make sure things don't get out of control. And I thought, when I first saw him, I thought, oh man, I wonder why they're dressed alike. If you're in a match with each other or you're promoting a match with each other, I would think opponents wouldn't want to dress alike. But then real quick, I forgot about all of that. Real quick, what I thought that this criticism that I would have, that would be all about the whole thing. I mean, it went right out the window, because this whole the whole segment went right out the window. It was a wild, wild scene. You had Charlotte on one side, you had Tiffany on the other side, you had things being bandied about, you had Chicago being Chicago, which, by the way, Chicago should always be Chicago. But, I mean, a lot of people, especially coming off of that, it left a lot of us going, what did we just watch? I don't know what it was. I mean, it was tense. You had that feeling. So sometimes, like, you watch a segment and it's like, it's uncomfortable. But the reason it's uncomfortable is because there's this palpable tension. And the more you think about it, the more you're like, yeah, maybe that's a good thing. You know, I don't pretend to be in the head of any performer. I don't pretend to have any idea what's really going on. All I can do is watch. And I will say that the fact that there was a real, palpable tension between Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton, and the fact that immediately afterwards, people were like, oh, you got to cut a podcast on this immediately afterwards, just waiting for Notsam to say something about Tiffany and Charlotte, kind of tells you that whatever was happening, it did something. It definitely got interest up. So, Tiffany and Charlotte are out there, and this is coming off of the dual box segment that they had 2 weeks ago on SmackDown. But Tiffany and Charlotte came out there, and I don't know if things got off the rails. I don't know if it was supposed to feel like things got off the rails, but they really didn't. I don't know. I don't know if they didn't expect the crowd to react the way the crowd reacted, just real quick, it felt like there was a visceral animosity that was going on between these two competitors. And real quick, you got this feeling like, I know this is all a show, but I'm not sure if this is part of the show. And for me, whatever, as long as it's building to a match, as long as it's building to a story, I don't know. A part of me thinks that might be okay. Like, people are genuinely interested. Like, here's the thing. Was everything that was said, was it helpful to the cause? Probably not. Did everything that gets said needed to be said? Probably not. What was planned, what was not planned? I don't know. But did it leave me incredibly curious, I'll say, for lack of a better term, for what is actually going to happen at WrestleMania when these two meet? Yeah, it really did. And that was my whole thing, right? As I'm thinking about this, I go, look, at the end of the day, I feel a tension between these two competitors. And that tension is going to carry over to the match. This match that on paper, what I thought I saw was just like, okay, Charlotte's back. She's winning the Royal Rumble. You have this person who gets compared to Charlotte, who's like the next sort of big top star against the current top star, like the first real sort of blue chipper, if you want to call it that, to come from NXT versus the latest blue chipper to come from NXT. And all of a sudden, over the last 2 weeks, it develops into something much more personal. Now, I think that is something that you probably even want to explore going forward, because you know that like that tension is going to spill out in the ring. Real, not real, show, not show, script, not script. It doesn't matter. That tension is going to spill out in the ring. So I think that is something that we're going to see. We got to see in some way, shape, or form expanded upon. You know, I think a lot of people were caught off guard by the segment. But what I heard more than anything else, and what I think I felt the same, was that as much as people were caught off guard by the segment, people were also like, you know, I'm more interested in the match. I wasn't sure that this was going to be one of those big matches that I'm interested in seeing explode in the ring. And now all of a sudden, even though I don't know quite what that was, I'm more interested in seeing it. And there's something to that. You know, ultimately, there's something to that. And that is part of kind of the new way of telling stories. That how do you work in a way where everybody's aware of the story that's going on? You have to play with reality sometimes. And sometimes leave it uncomfortable. Sometimes make uncomfortable television that people can't look away from and that people end up wanting to expound upon, that people want to see more from, that leads to people wanting to see a WrestleMania match. Because now all of a sudden, Charlotte and Tiffany feel like a WrestleMania match. This no longer feels like the old guard versus the new guard. This no longer feels like the winner of the Royal Rumble challenging the current champion. This feels like something different. This feels like there is something that we are not aware of going on between Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton that goes beyond the sort of, you know, game pieces that have been set going towards WrestleMania. You got 2 SmackDowns headed there. And I mean, if it were me, I'd go, yeah, let's turn this into, we already have the WWE Women's Championship. You already have this sort of first, I don't know, icon to come out of the NXT Women's division versus the latest icon to come out of the NXT Women's division. Like, you have all of that foundationally, but to find out that there's a real problem, or that there's a perception that we have of a real problem, I kind of feel like that's something that you have to play with. And maybe not every ounce of territory that was traveled in that segment need be traveled again, but the feeling that it gave you. That to me is what it's all about. The feeling that it gave you, the interest that it developed in this rivalry. You can't really deny it. You're there now. You might as well benefit from it, right? You might as well take it all the way. Because at this point, you're going to have something. And look, I think a lot of people, I think Tiffany Stratton's going to get cheered and Charlotte Flair is going to get booed. What you saw in Chicago is going to be amplified even more in Las Vegas. And that's not something that you're going to change on the way to WrestleMania. That's just the way it is. But you have the opportunity in the women's division to have this match where one person is insanely cheered, one person is insanely booed, and you can create a story within this match that people truly believe they want to tear each other limb from limb. And at the end of the day, that's what wrestling is all about. You know, you go back to telling wrestling stories. Well, what if in 2025, I could convince you that these two people want to tear each other limb from limb? Is that something you'd like to see? Is that something you'd like to buy a ticket to? Yeah. Yeah, I want to see two people that really want to tear each other limb from limb. Now, for the sake of everything moving forward, let's hope they don't actually want to tear each other limb from limb. But, you know, we're there. However you want to put it, we got there. There was some bad news on SmackDown. Kevin Owens came out and announced that, and there were rumors about this floating around before SmackDown came on. He announced that his doctors, that he had neck problems that he had been kind of dealing with all this year, and that his doctors had told him he was going to need neck surgery. And so because his doctor said, no, you need neck surgery and you need it now, Kevin said he's for the time being, for the short term, he's done. Which means he's not going to WrestleMania, and it means he doesn't know how long he's going to be out for because he's got to have neck surgery, and that's a serious thing. And now look, Kevin Owens is talented enough that he can do literally anything inside the wrestling business and be great at it. But I think we love to see him wrestle. We love the stories that he tells in the ring, and I feel like he is really in the pocket in the last year or so, just like doing some of his best stuff between the Cody stuff and the Sammy stuff, going into the Randy stuff. I mean, excellent work. And then all of a sudden, right now, it gets taken away. It sucks. I was so hoping that there was going to be a swerve. I was so hoping for a salmon jacket Mark Henry moment. And it's not just because I love a swerve. It's not just because there was a certain irony when he said that he had to go away because he had neck issues. Meanwhile, he's been pile driving everybody. I said, that feels a little on the nose. But it wasn't even the irony that I was hoping for. The reason I was hoping for a swerve is because I want to see Kevin Owens wrestle. I want to see him at WrestleMania. I want to see him on the SmackDown after WrestleMania. I don't want Kevin Owens to go away. That's the real reason why I was hoping that it would be a swerve. He came out. He was wearing his Bret Hart hoodie. We know he loves Bret Hart. He was wearing a Finn Balor t-shirt. And that's the real interesting thing about Kevin Owens. I remember Kevin Owens. Actually, I remember going on a tour of the Performance Center. It must have been, it was like WWE 2K, I don't know, was it 2K15? It was whatever video game was coming out. I think it was for the video game. And it was even the Performance Center was a fairly new, like they were promoting it as like, look what we've got here. It was when the arena that is the NXT arena now housed like 7 rings. And I remember going there and looking at one of the rings, and Kevin Owens and Finn Balor, at that point, Kevin Steen and Prince Devitt were both in the ring kind of doing roll drills while we were all there, for this video game thing. And I was like, oh my God, that's Kevin Steen and Devitt in the ring doing, and they would kind of make eye contact with the people that recognized who they were and, nod or whatever. It was really, really cool because, and that's why that was the first thing I thought of when he was wearing that Finn Balor t-shirt. that Finn Balor and Kevin Owens came in to NXT at the exact same time. And Finn Balor and Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn before them, but Sami Zayn was completely repackaged. Sami Zayn came in, he lost the mask, he became a totally different person. Still a huge signing, but a totally different person. Finn Balor and Kevin Owens really ended up being the first two people to come into NXT to, even though they changed their names, for the most part, just come in and do what they were doing on the independents in Japan. Look the way they looked on the independents in Japan. And be those big signings that ended up being the first sort of stars of NXT. They would go and have that ladder match at the first NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, which is one of the most important NXT shows ever. But Kevin Owens, I mean, he was that real, maybe first guy that was so incredibly good. And I never got to see him in Reseda. I went to one PWG show when they were running in Reseda, and it was the greatest. But it was after Kevin Owens had already come to WWE. But I did get to see him a lot in Ring of Honor. And I got to see his last match in the Ladder Wars with Generico, and I got to see so much of his Ring of Honor stuff. And, of course, I saw the Pro Wrestling Guerrilla stuff on tape and everything. And I mean, he just had such a presence, but also had this ability to look like an everyman and then go in the ring and become a superhero. The stuff that he was doing was stuff you weren't seeing elsewhere. And he was one of those guys who it was like, this guy is just too good. But WWE, he's not a WWE guy. WWE's not going to use him. And he broke that mold. After him, the floodgates were opened, but he broke that mold. He was the one that it was like, no. WWE is going to use him. And everywhere, every step he took in WWE, he succeeded. He was undeniable every step of the way. Coming into NXT and immediately being that attraction, being that thing that people had to look at. Coming onto the main roster and starting with a rivalry with John Cena. And we all know what John Cena will make, the level to which John Cena will make you rise to if you're going to share that spotlight with him. And Kevin Owens hung immediately, coming right off of NXT, immediately hung with John Cena. And I mean, he made a habit of that, becoming Universal Champion. The stuff they did with Jericho, the stuff they did with the Bloodline, the stuff, I mean, he could go on and on. The fact that he and Sami Zayn were able to continue their partnership / rivalry on again, off again. From the independents in Canada through WrestleMania all the way to this year is remarkable. Nobody's ever done anything like that. And he comes to and that's why even when he was hinting, like, I don't know if or when I'll be back, it was like, bro, no. I'm not ready for that reality. I'm not even remotely ready for that reality. And I'm like, please punt Randy Orton. Please take out Randy Orton. Please do something. And by the way, if somehow he does at WrestleMania, I'll be happy. I'll be happy. If you made me feel feelings, but it's still a swerve, I'll be happy. I don't think it is. But I'll be happy. Because he and Randy just exchanged looks. And Kevin Owens left the ring and Randy got in the ring. So now we get into kind of part 2 of this story, which is Nick Aldis tells Randy Orton, that means you don't have a match at WrestleMania. We've got 2 episodes of SmackDown. Before WrestleMania, most of the key players already have matches assigned. Randy Orton does not. So Randy Orton's got to fight somebody at WrestleMania, right? Who does Randy Orton face at WrestleMania? And there are some people that are suggesting, if you got to do something, maybe one of the big debuts. We saw Rey Fenix debut on SmackDown, did a hell of a job, had a hell of a match with Nathan Fraser. Maybe have Rey Fenix fight Randy Orton. I don't know. There are all these rumors floating around. Is Aleister Black going to show back up in WWE? Maybe instead of waiting until after Mania, maybe have Aleister Black show up at WrestleMania and fight Randy Orton. Is Rusev coming back to WWE? Maybe have Rusev. I mean, WrestleMania this year, I think one of the 2 days WrestleMania this year is actually on Rusev Day. So maybe have Rusev come back and fight Randy Orton. Somebody, whatever. I don't know, man. I've got to tell you. The minute that he dropped Nick Aldis with that RKO, I said, I think we might have it. I think that might be your match. And you could say, well, how are you going to set that match up? It's real easy. Randy Orton says, hey, Nick, what's my match? Nick says, I can't find you one. Then you are the match. I mean, if Randy Orton RKOs Nick Aldis at the beginning of SmackDown next week, that's now 2 in a row. Maybe does something else in the middle of the episode. You close the episode and saying, all right, Randy, I'll do it. I'll do it. And the next SmackDown after next week is the go-home show, is WrestleMania SmackDown. I think that's the moment where you go, okay, we're going to do it. Nick Aldis versus Randy Orton. For me, that's the match because I was talking about it last week when I was talking about who might win between Cody and Cena. I was talking about how Backlash is in St. Louis and how it feels like one of the reasons I said Cody could beat Cena is because Randy versus Cody could be the next match. And by the way, Cena could beat Cody because Randy versus Cena could be the next match. But if that is the idea, that Randy Orton beats Kevin Owens and then Randy Orton, because Randy Orton teased wanting the world title, the WWE Championship, last week. If the idea is that Randy were to beat Kevin Owens and then go after the WWE Championship, you can't have one of these new people come in. You can't have Rey Fenix come in and go to WrestleMania to eat the RKO. I mean, you could, but I don't know. You can't have a new signee come in, make their WrestleMania debut, and Randy Orton RKOs them. And you can't have Randy Orton necessarily lose if the plan is to go forward with Randy. You can have Randy Orton beat Nick Aldis. Now, you may be screwing yourself out of a general manager. You know, I don't know what you do with Aldis as the general manager after that, but Nick Aldis could take a loss. And it would be a big match, and it would be an attraction match. And maybe it's just because I saw it right in front of me and I said, yeah, that's what I want. And maybe it's because I like Nick Aldis and I want to see him get in the ring. And the idea of Nick Aldis getting a WrestleMania match is like amazing to me. But that is kind of where my head went. If it's going to go somewhere with Randy Orton, I suppose we'll see. But the WrestleMania card as it stands, before we get into emails, of course, are Cody Rhodes versus John Cena for the WWE Championship. Now, we talked about that a lot. The Raw segment for Monday, we went in full detail on the emergency podcast that came out. So if you didn't watch the emergency podcast or listen to it, check that out. We also got into detail on the Raw recap podcast on that. But of course, yeah, your main event is John Cena versus Cody Rhodes, WWE Championship. Of course, you got your triple threat match. The other main event, Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins versus CM Punk. You got your World Heavyweight Championship, Gunther versus Jey Uso. You have your Women's World Championship, which right now is Io Sky versus Bianca Belair. And they had that angle on Raw, and Rhea Ripley held up the title at the end of the show. I've got to believe Rhea Ripley is going to be added to this match. Right now, on paper, it's Io Sky versus Bianca Belair. I have to imagine Rhea Ripley gets added to this match. Tiffany Stratton versus Charlotte Flair for the WWE Women's Championship. I think there's a lot of potential here. Logan Paul versus AJ Styles. That match was made official by Adam Pearce on Twitter during Monday Night Raw this week. That is an official match after the confrontation that they had in England, as well as the confrontation they had at Madison Square Garden before that. AJ Styles versus Logan Paul is your match, which I'm very much looking forward to. That match. I think that, yeah, that AJ versus Logan Paul is going to be a hell of a match and a great way to put AJ Styles, who's kind of slowly getting back into the fold, into a pretty premium spot at WrestleMania. I hope AJ Styles wins. I'm worried he won't, but I would like to see AJ Styles win. LA Knight versus Jacob Fatu for the United States Championship is official. Jacob Fatu won the last man standing match against Braun Strowman. Still made Braun Strowman look like $1 million, but Jacob Fatu won that match. Now, look, I'm hoping this doesn't become a multi-person match. I thought it was going to be a multi-person match. The graphic came out. Jacob Fatu versus LA Knight. And now, even though before I loved the idea of a multi-person match and Solo cost Jacob and you can go to the races with that, I now really want to see Jacob Fatu win the United States Championship at WrestleMania. One-on-one, LA Knight versus Jacob Fatu. I mean, what a platform to put Jacob on in front of the world to really showcase, okay, if we're looking into the future, this is our guy. If you're looking at people who may main event next year's WrestleMania, this is our guy. And you just have no Solo nonsense, none of the other nonsense. Just Jacob Fatu beats LA Knight. There you go. And then the SmackDown after WrestleMania, Solo can start to get weird. Solo can start to get jealous. We can still start to tell that story of Jacob versus Solo. But now I want it to be with Jacob as the United States champion. And I want a one-on-one. Oh, LA Knight versus Jacob Fatu. I got very, very excited about that. It was also made official. We are getting Jade Cargill versus Naomi. So happy for both of them. Naomi has been doing like home run work with this character. It has been absolutely awesome. And to see that just be a one-on-one grudge match at WrestleMania, I think is super, super cool. You've got a tag team gauntlet next week on SmackDown. The winner faces Liv Morgan and Raquel for the Women's Tag Team Championship. I mean, it could be Natalya and Maxine, just because they were on Raw kind of politicking to be put together as a tag team on the show. But I feel like it'll probably be Lyra Valkyria and Bayley. I think that what you're looking at is Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez versus Lyra Valkyria and Bayley for the Women's Tag Team Championship. I think, that's an interesting one. I don't think that's where people saw Liv Morgan going earlier this year. I don't think that's where people saw Bayley going earlier this year, but who knows the circumstances that led us there. Those are the matches that are announced right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We got 9 matches announced for WrestleMania. I would say we're pretty locked into the idea that Randy Orton's going to have a match. So that makes 10. It really seems like New Day versus the War Raiders is going to be on the show. If you're watching Raw, it seems like that. That would be 11. McIntyre versus Priest, I could have sworn was already announced. I thought I saw a graphic for it. Maybe somebody just made it. I could have sworn that match was already announced. Apparently that match has not yet been announced. But I've got to believe that that match is happening. That makes 12, and then 13 would be an Intercontinental Championship match. The way I see it, and I've seen it this way for a long time. I've been talking about it on the podcast forever. There are some people that are saying like Braun versus Finn, Braun Breaker versus Finn, maybe Penta in for a triple threat. How does anybody does not see this and has not seen this the whole time? I feel like it's going to be a fatal 4-way: Braun Breaker, Penta, Finn Balor, Dominic Mysterio. And I mean, I love my finish. Is that Penta's out, Braun Breaker spears Finn Balor. You know what? No. My finish was Braun Breaker spears Finn Balor. Penta takes out Braun Breaker. Dominic covers and pins Finn Balor. And Dominic says, I did it so we could have the title in the Judgment Day. And Finn Balor's pissed. And Dominic's the Intercontinental Champion. And now Penta and Braun Breaker have matches. I mean, money. All money. But right now, that's 13. And I don't know if they'll add another one so you can get 7 on each night or just do 6 one night, 7 the other, whatever. However you want to do it, you can do it. But that's what we've got for WrestleMania as it stands. And if you have some ideas of what they can add, or if you think I'm wrong about some of those matches that I'm assuming, or anything, quite frankly, email us, notsamwrestling@gmail.com, notsamwrestling@gmail.com. That's our email address, is notsamwrestling@gmail.com. We got a ton of emails this week, so I'm going to try to get through them fast. Mark writes in, Fatu, and I will say to you, this last week has created a lot of questions. Do you think Roman and Paul could be setting up Punk the way they set up Lesnar a couple years ago? No, I don't think so at all. I don't think that's in Roman's character. I don't think that that's Paul's character. I don't think that makes any sense for either of them to do that. Yeah, no. Could Roman put together a new bloodline with Jacob? No, I'm moving on, bro. I'm moving on. No. You can't just, every single idea that pops into your head, you can't just send me. Lehman writes in, there have been a lot of online discourse regarding the number of people watching AEW on Max. Yeah. Specifically, AEW defenders claiming these numbers equal very close to what they get through traditional cable. Do you believe these numbers are as high as someone like Meltzer claims they are? Well, I mean, I don't think it's Meltzer claiming. The numbers out there. But, like, I mean, if you're listening to Notsam Wrestling to try to get television numbers, you're listening to the wrong show. I don't care about how many people are watching. I care about how good the show is. I care about what's happening. And by the way, the only reason we're not talking about Dynasty is because this podcast is being recorded before AEW Dynasty, just so you know. But no, I have no idea what the numbers are. I don't work for Discovery, Warner Brothers Discovery. I don't know what the numbers are on Max. I don't know how many people are watching. I know if I'm watching or not. And I know what I think about it. And I'll tell you about it. You know, that's what I have a podcast for. All right, this is coming from Phil. All the way from Stamford in UK. Oh, the second best Stamford in the world. Stamford, United Kingdom. I love you, not Sam Fatu, he says. Well, I will say to you. Fatu! What a time to be a wrestling fan. No question, just an acknowledgement. There's so much happening. It's a joyful time to be a fan. I love it. I appreciate it, man. It really is a great time. I'm skipping some of these longer ones. Let's go to Carson. I would like to hear your opinion and dissect Charlotte and Tiffany's promo. Okay, well, I'm glad that you were listening because you got it. Let's see. Josh writes in, there's been a great build-up to the Cena-Cody match and the triple threat. I can't argue that. However, last night I put Tiffany and Charlotte up there with them in regard to the build. See, that's what I mean about that tension. There's a weirdness, but that tension still exists. They've had great physical battles around the arena, and then last night, scripted or unscripted, they went to another level. If WWE planned on giving the belt to Charlotte at Mania, they need to reconsider because I'm on board with Tiffy time. Also, no shot Kaiser is in Charlotte's DMs. I don't know who's in Charlotte's DMs, but I definitely think Tiffany Stratton is coming in to Las Vegas as a babyface. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think everybody just needs to embrace what's going on and to make this a wrestling story. That's all. There's a lot on the table here. Let's go to Matty Ice. Oh, this is again about Tiffany Stratton. I kind of covered that. This is a very, very long one. All these are, I mean, stop writing paragraphs. Avik writes in, what color do you see John Cena wearing at WrestleMania? I'm guessing white with a picture of him in a poker chip sort of design. I think it'll be, no, because if you look at Royal Rumble, the shirt was blue and white, like the Indianapolis Colts. In Canada, in Toronto, it was sports themed. So what do you got in Las Vegas? I think it'll be Raiders themed. I think it'll be black and silver is what he'll be wearing, which good timing because he's coming in as a heel. But yeah, I would imagine that the John Cena shirt will match the Raiders that play in the stadium that they'll be doing WrestleMania in. So I think you're looking at a black and silver John Cena, which could be really, really cool. Let's see. A few things. This is from, I guess, Darius. I thought Delirious. I was like, Delirious writing in? Darius. A few things come to mind when I think of Cody versus John Cena. It takes me back to when John faced CM Punk, and CM Punk walked away with the title. So they made a new title, and John Cena won. And then CM Punk returned and fought to determine, the true champion. Yes, of course. Money in the Bank 2011, CM Punk beats John Cena, walks out with the title. Then John Cena ends up becoming the interim champion, and then CM Punk returns so they can do John Cena versus CM Punk to declare a true champion. As far as, I feel like they're recreating this. So you think that they have John Cena win, then declare a new Universal Champion or whatever, undisputed champion, and then there'll be a champion versus champion match? Okay, maybe. As far as Paul Heyman being in CM Punk's corner at WrestleMania, remember you mentioned Roman was unable to win without his wise man, but as soon as the wise man returned to his corner at War Games, he got a win. So, by CM Punk having Paul Heyman in his corner, he is poised to win the big match at WrestleMania. No, Roman is poised to lose the big match by that logic. I didn't say whoever corner Paul Heyman is in, that's the person who's winning. I said Roman feels he needs Paul Heyman in his corner to win. So Seth Rollins winning would be just as likely as CM Punk winning. CM Punk's won a lot without Paul Heyman in his corner. But that goes back to my point that I made at the beginning of the show, which is if Roman Reigns wins the match without Paul Heyman, then Paul Heyman's going to have to do a lot to get back in the good graces of Roman Reigns. Ayush from India, my man, writes in. First of all, I acknowledge my podcast tribal chief. Thank you. What do you think about Roman's involvement in the Rock, Cena, and Cody story? In this mix of this triple threat, it's sort of out of place for now. Will Cena selling his soul to The Rock and him doing everything in his power to make sure Cena wins come in the way of Roman's? No. First of all, I think Roman's redemption story is over. As I said, Roman's redemption story ended when he won the tribal chief. Now it's a different story to win the WWE Championship. I don't think he's on a redemption story anymore, especially if he were to win at WrestleMania. Then it's over. I don't think he has anything to do with Cody versus Cena. But I do think that another Cody-Roman match is on the table. I would love to see another Roman-Cena match. And I still think Roman versus Rock is the match of all matches. So that's not to say forever, but that's to say right now. John writes in, let's see, a gauntlet match 1 week before WrestleMania to determine who will compete against Liv and Raquel. The best heel. Please make it make sense. They were teasing Lyra and Bayley versus Liv and Raquel. At least there was some story there. The only thing that could make... I mean, I talked about this briefly. Who knows? It feels like there have been stuff that has started for Liv that has not finished. You know what I mean? On this road to WrestleMania. I think that they've teased Bayley versus Lyra. I mean, Bayley and Lyra coming together to help Liv or to take out Liv and Raquel. I think that pairing was teased for the team. And, I think ultimately, yeah, that'll probably be a match. I'm with you in the sense that, Liv from last year's WrestleMania to this year's WrestleMania is probably the MVP of the women's division. But also, I think too often people think of WrestleMania as like an achievement award or not even an attend. I don't know but it's not an award. Like WrestleMania is what stories need to be told right now. Who needs to be presented in which way so that going into next year, we're moving forward in the right way. Liv Morgan knocked it out of the park. But that story ended when that story ended. You know what I mean? So for me, and this is not about Liv Morgan because I'm the biggest Liv Morgan fan in the world, but also like, I just think that I don't like the idea of people going, this person should have a match because they're so good. And it's like, yeah, I agree. But what match? What story is there? What story has been told? I think Karrion Kross should have a match. I think one of these Karrion Kross stories should be flushed out. But the story's not there right now. So who could I argue for Karrion Kross to have a match with? That's where my brain tends to go. And I think you guys know that from listening to the show. Paul writes in, is there a chance the crowd for Cena Cody becomes the crowd for Rock Hogan at WrestleMania? No. I'm hearing Let's Go Cena chants creep to around 50% of the crowd. No. Because the only time those Let's Go Cena chants creep in is because they want it to lead to Cena sucks. Let's Go Cena, Cena sucks is the chant. So people start chanting Let's Go Cena because they want to say Cena sucks. And when people start chanting Cena sucks, there's a Pavlovian response to chant Let's Go Cena. I have no doubt, right? And I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. But I believe Cody will be cheered and Cena will be booed. We're in an era right now where people like the stories. People enjoy booing John Cena. And they enjoy cheering Cody Rhodes. Every time John Cena's music hits, boos rain down. Every time Cody Rhodes' music hits, cheers rain down. That's what I think we're going to get. I don't think we need to overcomplicate that. All right, this will be the last email from Nick. I acknowledge you. I have this idea, and I think you're going to like it. I think you'll think it's pretty cool. I've had the thought of Cena defeating Cody at Mania, giving him a 17th title win. And as time goes on, he slowly goes back to the way of the fans. And then Cody and Cena have a rematch, maybe SummerSlam, and it's said PLE. We get the double turn, and we end it with WWE giving us American Homelander Cody Rhodes. Why do you think I will like that? Have you ever listened to this podcast before? I don't think Cody should be a heel. I can't make that more clear. I understand how cool it would be. I understand that Cody would be great at it. I understand that it would be one of those great, character swings. There is no reason for Cody Rhodes to be a heel right now. It is so rare air for somebody to be a babyface on the level that Cody Rhodes is a babyface, and to maintain it for as long as he's maintained it, and to maintain it with a cross-section of the audience, the way he's maintained it with a cross-section of the audience. You don't just take a babyface that appeals to literally the entire audience and is able to keep that appeal going for 3 years and just throw it out because you watch the show, The Boys. When the babyface run is over, the babyface run will be over, and we'll know it, and it will be time. But until it's time, there is no reason to turn Cody Rhodes heel. What would be the point of turning John Cena babyface and Cody Rhodes heel? Because after SummerSlam, we'll have John Cena for September, October, November, and December. We've got a big babyface for 4 months. And then John Cena leaves. And after 2025, we've got what was the most successful babyface that is a pure babyface that the WWE has ever had long-term since Hulk Hogan. We've had him turn heel because we like to show The Boys. And John Cena's not around anymore. Explain it to me. Justify it to me. Yeah, but can you imagine? Yeah, I can imagine. It'd be cool in the moment. I got it. I don't think that's cool, and I don't like it. And I've said many times, I understand everything. But when Cody Rhodes comes out, grown-up men cheer. Grown-up ladies cheer. Children cheer. And babies cheer. That's what happens when Cody Rhodes comes out. And when there's a big bad guy, an absolute villain, the biggest villain you could possibly think of, whether it's Brock Lesnar, whether it's Roman Reigns, peak bloodline Roman Reigns, whether it's John Cena as a heel for the first time, there is one babyface that is a pure babyface that can stand up to that ultimate villain as a true good guy does. And it's Cody Rhodes. So why would you get to SummerSlam and turn him? Now look, if it's July, if it's June, Cody Rhodes is getting split reactions, okay, then it's time. But I don't think that's going to happen because Cody Rhodes is real good at what he does, whether you want to admit it or not, whether you watch The Boys or not. So no, I don't think Cody and John Cena, after everything John Cena has done and said, I don't think you should do a double turn at SummerSlam for a myriad of reasons. But maybe it'll happen. I'm just one man with one man's opinions. And that's all this is at the end of the day. Thank you for being here for all of this one man's opinions. Keep it locked. Make sure you're subscribed across audio platforms, Apple, Spotify. We're on the SiriusXM app, wherever you want to be, and listening to every single podcast that we drop because there's a lot to discuss, and every single one of them is chock full of different information. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. You can watch every podcast we do in full on YouTube at youtube.com/Notsam Wrestling. Subscribe, like the videos, leave comments, send them to your friends, do the whole deal. And we'll see you all again real soon. You think there's not going to be an emergency podcast? There's going to be an emergency podcast. We're going to do Raw Recap on Tuesday. It's going to be a great time. There's so much wrestling to talk about. Be there for it. We'll see you soon. Have a good one.